Hello, my friends. It's Bible Class Betty, and I can't wait to get into the book of Judges with you. Are you ready to start? Now, remember, every time we start a new book or a new chapter, we need to make sure we know all the words because a lot of the words in the Bible, well, they're old-time words. Maybe we don't use them anymore. And sometimes, well, they meant something different then than they mean to us today. So let's take a look. Abandon. Do you know abandon? Well, that would be to give up completely, to cease, or to desert. Abandon. How about altar? We've done this one. Remember, an altar is where they would offer their burnt sacrifices. Why, it could be as simple as just a bronze table where they made those burnt offerings. Altar. Ascent. That's the act of going up. Remember, descent is going down, but ascent is going up. Asheroth. Oh, Asheroth, that was a false god of the Sidonians. It was kind of considered to be a girl god, but it wasn't the one true God of Israel. It was fake. How about Baal or Baal? Why, oh, we know this one. He too is a fake god. He's a false god. He's just a big old lump of cement and stone. But those crazy Canaanite people worshipped him like he was the one true God. And Baal would constantly be a temptation for the Israelites to worship instead of the one true God. I mean, after all God had done for them, why would they bend down to stone except everybody else was doing it in Canaan? Well, that's why God gave them over to the Israelites. How about the word covenant? Why, covenant is a pact or a promise of loyalty between two people. Why, the most famous was God's covenant with the people of Israel on Mount Sinai, where he promised to protect them and provide for them as long as they kept the law. Covenant. Descendants. Why, we know this one. It's like preceding or coming from an ancestor. Why, you're a descendant of your grandpa. Devote. Devote is set apart for a special purpose, dedicated. How about dismiss? Oh, that would be to send away or cause or allow to go. Dismiss. How about distress? Now, distress would be, oh, it's a condition of danger or desperate need. Inherit. Why, that's something, money or items, land that you receive by legal right, property, maybe from someone's death. Inherit. Inquire. Oh, why, that's to ask or to investigate. Inquire. Kindle. This isn't just something that you can, electronic device that you can read on. Why, Kindle in these days meant to stir up, to start a fire, not literally, but to stir up feelings or thoughts, to kindle. Palm. That's not just your hand. Why, it's a special kind of tropical tree. It's tall and its stems are crowned and very large and feathery fan-shaped leaves. Palm. Persist. Why, that means to continue, especially past a usual or expected time, to hang in there, to keep going, to persist. How about the word plunder? Why, plunder is going to be to rob or to take by force, like in a raid. you're going to loot someone's valuables. Plunder. It's not a nice word. How about scout? Why, that's going to be to explore an area to find out more information about it. Snare. Oh, remember, it's a trap. It is something that you use to trap someone or maybe to deceive them, trick them. Territory. Oh, a territory is an assigned area, like we have territories in America. Why, the United States, we've got the territory of Oklahoma or Texas or Michigan. Why, territory. What about the word urge? Oh, it's to ask for support, to try and persuade. I urge you to keep up your studies. You're doing wonderful. Well, now we're ready to begin the book of Judges. Remember, the book of Joshua began after the death of Moses? Well, the book of Judges begins after the death of Joshua. But it's a little different. There is no one to take Joshua's place. You would think Israel would instinctively turn to God for his guidance, right? Well, they do at the start, but they lose their way. Remember, at this point, Israel has taken a large portion of Canaan, but many of the tribes still have work to do. Oh, well, let's look at some of those rhymes and remember where we've been. In 23, hold fast to the Lord and to his decree is the message in Joshua 23. Choose who you will serve, one God and no more, is the final message in Joshua 24. Well, we should look and see what the book of Judges is all about. In the book of Joshua, it was all about achieving victory through obedience. The book of Judges could be summarized as failure through compromise. Judges shows the cycle of Israel falling away from God, and then they repent and they cry out to God. God would raise up a judge to deliver them. There are 14 judges in all. 12 are described in this book, covering the time between Joshua's leadership and the time of Israel's kings. God used these judges to demonstrate his compassion and rescue his wayward people time and time again. Well, who wrote the book of Judges? We really don't know. Some people think it could be Samuel, the very last of all the judges, but we're not sure. When was the book of Judges written? Well, most scholars place it in the Bible period of the Judges somewhere between 1450 BC and 1,000 years before Christ. The precise dates are still widely debated, but this book covers several hundred years of Israelites' history. Where did the events in the book of Judges take place? Well, the first part of Judges 1 describes some of the military victories of the Israelites in Canaan, specifically in the land belonging to Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin. The second part of this chapter records the pagan nations that remained in the promised land and lived amongst the Israelites. Who will we meet in chapters 1 and 2? Well, of course, we're still going to mention Joshua, Moses' assistant who led the people through the wilderness and into the promised land. Remember, God had selected Joshua to lead the Israelites into the promised land after Moses' death. We're also going to meet Adonai-Bezek. Well, he was the king of Bezek. We're also going to read a little more about Caleb. Caleb was one of the 12 spies God sent into Canaan to spy out the land in Numbers 13. He was one of only two spies who had the faith that God would help them conquer the land. Joshua was the other spy. And then we're also going to meet Othniel. Othniel is Caleb's younger brother, who would eventually become a judge in Israel. So open your Bibles to Judges chapter 1. Now, approximately 10 or 20 years have passed since our last chapters in Joshua when the land of Canaan was divided among the people. As the years passed, as Joshua got older, remember he gave them that strong warning to always follow God? Oh, but now Joshua has passed away. We need to see what happens next. Now, in our Bibles, if you look, I see blue. Well, blue is a person. And if it's in a word in green, that means it's a name of a place. If it's highlighted in yellow, that means someone's talking. It's a quote. But those red words, all those red words are the lovely words from God speaking to his people. So let's get started. The continuing conquest, victories, wars, battles of Canaan. After the death of Joshua, the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, "Who shall go up first against the Canaanites and fight them?" The Lord said, "Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand." And Judah said to Simeon, his brother, "Come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I likewise will go with you into the territory allotted to you." So Simeon went with him. Now remember, there are still natives living in the land, and each tribe has work to do to take over the land that was given to them. Remember, God had promised them over 3,000 square feet of land, and so far they've only taken about 30,000 square feet. Simeon and Judah fight together. After all, Simeon's land is located in the land that belonged to Judah. When Jacob blessed his 12 sons, he indicated that Judah would be given the rights of the firstborn because of the actions of his older brothers. Years later, when the tribes headed out across the desert, Judah was the first in the marching order. Judah was the first to receive an inheritance, and now Judah is to set the example for the other tribes for how to take up arms and fight against the Israelites within the borders of their allotted land. Then Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand, and they defeated 10,000 of them at Bezek. Why, they found Adoni-Bezek at Bezek and fought against him and defeated the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Adoni-Bezek, remember the king, fled, and they pursued him, and they caught him, and they cut off his thumbs and his big toes. And Adoni-Bezek said, "70 kings with their thumbs and their big toes cut off used to pick scraps from under my table, as I have done, so God has repaid me." And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. Oh, Judah and Simeon have several victories. We read about Adoni-Bezek where he says Adoni-Bezek had cut off the thumbs of his opponents, so they couldn't hold a spear, and he had cut off their big toes, so they couldn't assume a battle stance against him. It's hard to balance without your big toe. Adoni-Bezek recognized this was God repaying him for the way he had dealt with his enemies. Verse 8, then the men of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it and struck it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. Oh, and afterward the men of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites who lived in the hill country, in the Negeb, and in the lowland. And Judah went out against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. Now, the name Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arab, and they defeated Sheshai and Ahiman and Talmai. Well, Judah captures Jerusalem, but later in Judges, they lose control. Judges 1:21, because Jerusalem is referred to as a foreign city in Judges 19. Hebron was part of Caleb's inheritance. Caleb drove out the giant Anakim and occupied the town himself. From there, they went against the inhabitants of Debir. The name Debir was formerly Kiriath Sepher, and Caleb said, he who attacks Kiriath Sepher and captures it, I will give Achish, my daughter, for a wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it. And Caleb gave him Achish, his daughter, for a wife. And she came to him and urged him to ask her father for a field. And she dismounted from her donkey, and Caleb said to her, what is it you want? And she said to him, give me a blessing, since you have set me up in this land of the Negev. Give me also springs of water. And Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. Oh, this is a flashback to Joshua 15, where Caleb promised his daughter in marriage to whoever captures Kiriath. Othniel takes over this land. It is kind of weird that she has to marry her uncle, but they did that in those days. Judges chapter 1, verse 16. Now the descendants of the Kenite, that was Moses' father-in-law, went up with the people of Judah from the city of palms in the wilderness of Judah that lies in the Negeb around Arad, and they went and settled with the people. And Judah went with Simeon, his brother, and defeated the Canaanites who inhabited Zephath and devoted it to destruction. So the name of that city was called Hormah. Judah also captured Gaza with its territory, and Ashkelon with its territory, and Ekron with its territory. Oh, the Canaanites were relatives to Israel by Moses' marriage to Zipporah, and they remained friendly to Israel through the time of David. Now, the three Philistine cities that Judah takes are Gaza, Ashkelon, and Ekron. Do not remain in Israelite hands for long. Those were originally controlled by the Philistines. By the time we get to Samson, they're controlled by the Philistines once again. Judah made brave progress during this time. They were doing exactly what God had called them to do. Verse 19, and the Lord was with Judah, and he took possession of the hill country. But he could not drive out the inhabitants of the plain because they had chariots of iron. And Hebron was given to Caleb, as Moses had said. And he drove out from it the three sons of Anak, those giants. But the people of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites have lived with the people of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. Yes, the Philistine cities along the coastal plains had iron chariots, but the people of Israel had God. And they had a promise from God that they would defeat these people. Israel was effective at driving out the inhabitants in the mountains, in the mountain region, where they didn't have any iron chariots. I think they got scared and forgot they had God on their side. The Benjaminites did not dislodge the Jebusites living in Jerusalem, just like Judah had been unable to. The house of Joseph also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And the house of Joseph scouted out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. And the spies saw a man coming out from the city, and they said to him, "Please show us a way into the city, and we will deal kindly with you." And he showed them a way into the city. And they struck the city with the edge of the sword, but they let the man and all his family go. That sounds like Rahab. And the man went to the land of the Hittites and built a city and called its name Luz. And that is its name to this day. So here, the first fact we learn about Bethel's capture by the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, is that the Lord was with them, guaranteeing their victory. The method of attack called out for spying out the land. They approached a resident of the city and asked him for the weakest, most vulnerable point for an attack, just like Rahab. And they offered mercy to the man and his family. The man will settle in another area and call this new place of residence, well, the name of his old one, Luz. Oh, I really don't like this heading. It says failure to complete the conquest. Oh, Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shean and its villages, Tanakh and its villages, or the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, or the inhabitants of Abilene and its villages, or the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages, for the Canaanites persisted in dwelling in that land. When Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but they didn't drive them out completely. And Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer. So the Canaanites lived in Gezer among them. Oh dear. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron or the inhabitants of Nahalol. So the Canaanites lived among them, but became subject to forced labor. Asher did not drive out the inhabitants of Akko or the inhabitants of Sidon or of Alab or Azib or Helbah or Aphtik or Rehob. So the Asherites lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh or the inhabitants of Beth Anath, so they lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became subject to forced labor for them. The Amorites pressed the people of Dan back into the hill country, for they did not allow them to come down to the plain. The Amorites persisted in dwelling in Mount Heres, in Aljalon, and Shalem. But the hand of the house of Joseph rested heavily on them, and they became subject to forced labor. And the border of the Amorites ran from the ascent of the Akrabim from Selah and upward. Oh, this is a sad section. We read that Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants who were determined to remain in their land. Ephraim, Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali also failed. Whenever Israel gained enough strength, they would force the Canaanites into slave labor. But oftentimes, they'd end up living side by side. And interestingly, that was exactly what God did not want to happen. Dan was confined to the hill country because the Amorites controlled the land. Oh, our poem or a rhyme for Judges chapter 1 is Israel continues their work was not done. More to conquest in Joshua chapter 1. Now we're going to continue reading from Judges chapter 2 for just a little bit. In here, we're going to see Joshua. Remember, he passed away at the end of Joshua. And we're also going to meet an angel of the Lord. Why, this messenger from God appeared to the Israelites to rebuke or to get on to them for failing to keep the covenant of God. Why, many believe that the angel might have been God himself in a theophany. Verse 1, Israel's disobedience. And we can see right there that that's in red. So God's going to be speaking to the Israelites. Now, an angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I brought you up from Egypt. Oh, that was God. And brought you into the land I swore to give you, your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars, but you have disobeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall become thorns in your side, and their gods shall be a snare, a trap to you. Oh, the angel of the Lord delivered a message from God reminding Israel that he had delivered them from Egypt and that they were not to have agreements with the inhabitants of Canaan. The Lord tells the Israelites that he knows they have not obeyed him, and he will no longer help them drive out their enemies. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept. Oh, and they called the name of that place Bochum, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. Israel immediately wept aloud and began to offer sacrifices to God, but God would have preferred their obedience. If we look at the footnote here, see the A, and then there's our footnote. Bochum means weepers, and they named the city this because that was where they wept over the angel of the Lord's words. Several other locations have names related to what took place there, like Gilgal, sounds like the Hebrew word for roll, or acre meant trouble. Remember that? Oh, in Joshua chapter 7, the death of Joshua. When Joshua dismissed the people of Israel, each went to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen the great work of the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at age 110 years old, and they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance, Timnath Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gaash. The first verse of Judges states that Judah began after Joshua's death. But in this passage, we find him, well, alive, dismissing the tribes to take their inheritance. The author of Judges is now just taking readers through the process of shame from the beginning to end. He sets the stage by quoting several verses at the end of the book of Joshua. Remember, they served the Lord all the days of Joshua. My, how they've fallen. Judges chapter 2, verse 10. And all the generations who were gathered to their fathers, and there arose a generation after them who did not know what the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. Israel's unfaithfulness. Verse 11. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They served the Baals, and they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They went along after other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were around them. They bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord's anger. They abandoned the Lord and served the Baals and the Asheroth. How could an entire generation raised up by parents who were rescued at the hand of God throw themselves into idolatry? It blows my mind. I mean, until they crossed the Jordan, he had fed them. Why, he had given them the manna and protected them, but they didn't know God. Verse 11 refers to the Baals, and this refers to like multiple fake gods. There was, Baal Peor, Baal Zephon, Baal Zebub, Baal Bereth, just to name a few. Israel had abandoned the God who brought them out of Egypt and bowed down to fake gods, big old chunks of rock, because the people in Canaan were doing it. The people in Canaan who God told them to throw out. Can you see why God desired that Israel not share this land with them? He knew it would trap them into feeling the pressure to do what they did. God wanted their hearts for himself. He loved them. Verse 14. So the anger of the Lord was kindled. It was sparked against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them. Came in and took their stuff, and he sold them into the hand of their surrounding enemies so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, as the Lord had warned, and the Lord had sworn them, and they were in terrible distress. Israel, in turning from God and following the idols of their pagan neighbors, would no longer live under God's protection. Ironically, the fake gods had no power to save Israel from calamities that were coming. Israel will no longer be blessed when they go out and fight. Oh, that's a terrible way to end this lesson. Well, God wants his people's hearts. Even though he is all powerful, he doesn't force our obedience. In the Bible, we see a pattern of God's people promising they will never forget what he's done for them and quickly turning away from him and facing the consequences of their sin. Over and over, we see God's patience and compassion when they call out to him. And he forgives them. The more we understand and experience God's great love for us, the more we will want to obey him. So let's look at a couple of cartoons I found for chapters 1 and 2. Oh dear! King Adonai Bezek and the no good, very bad pedicure. Well, there wasn't a lot of good that happened in this lesson, so there weren't very many cartoons or that anyone could find funny here. But that's all I've got in cartoons. Now, if you're in my Bible class, we need to be working on that study guide. We need to be working on Joshua chapter 17 and 18. And I want you to work on your chapter heading cards for Joshua, all of Joshua 1 through 24, and then add in the cards for the chapter headings for Joshua 1. Okay? And until then, I will see you next week as we finish up chapter 2 and add chapter 3. Bye-bye.